Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I'm going to be looking back at some 2015 NBA Draft player evaluations. And the reason for this is just because I feel like this is a draft class that's been in the news a lot lately, with Kristaps Porzingis being traded, DAngelo Russell becoming an all-star, Justice Winslow becoming a really good point guard for the Heat in kind of a weird change of events, and even Jahlil Okafor coming back and being a pretty good player for the Pelicans. So I just wanted to look back and see what people had to say about these guys at the time of the draft and just see what they have to say. So we're over on NBADraft.net, and we're obviously going to start with number 1. I think I'm just going to do the top 10 in this video because those are the guys that I'm really interested in. So KarlAnthony-Towns was a 98 overall rated player, and his NBA comparisons were Andrew Bogut and Vlade Divac. Now, the reason that's a little bit weird to me is just because Bogut was a really good defensive player as well as a good passer, and Divac was obviously an outstanding passer. And I wouldn't say that either of those are really great skills that Cat possesses right now. He's an okay passer and an okay defender, but not really someone that I would think of in that kind of class for either of those two guys. So that comparison really hasn't come to fruition. He's more of an offensive base player, more of a post-up guy, a versatile guy that can shoot from 3 as well. Strengths: center prospect with the size and skill set to make a strong impact at both ends of the floor in the NBA. Hard worker, smart kid with strength of character. Shows desire and a competitive nature. And that's interesting to me because I feel like at times in Cat's career, people have knocked him for not being competitive enough and not showing enough energy and effort on the floor. So the fact that that's a strength at the time of the draft is certainly interesting. Weaknesses: has struggled mightily with his post offense early in the season. Post play, footwork, and confidence on the block needs a lot of work. Now, I will say that at the time that Karl-Anthony-Towns was a freshman at Kentucky, he really wasn't considered to be the number 1 pick for most of the season. For most of the season, it was actually Jahlil Okafor, who ended up being number 3. But the closer we got to the draft, the more and more apparent it became that the versatility that Towns provided was going to be something that a lot of NBA teams were going to want. But certainly early in the season, he did have some struggles with his post offense and his footwork, but he looked a lot better later in the year. Next up now is a guy that a lot of people have given me heat for on the channel, and that is DAngelo Russell, who obviously went 2nd overall to the Lakers, also rated as a 98 overall prospect, and his NBA comparisons were Penny Hardaway and Brandon Roy. And really that's just guys that had a good amount of size, were combo guards, could create for others, could score for themselves, but Brandon Roy specifically wasn't necessarily a true point guard or anything. And D'Lo coming into the draft was seen as someone that was going to have to grow into that point guard, lead guard role more so than anything else, and it was still kind of a combo guard player at the time of the draft. Strengths: it says intriguing long-term prospect considering his package of attributes, smart and smooth guard who never seems to get rattled or rushed into making mistakes, shows great poise and maturity for a freshman, makes everything look easy. And this was one of the things about DAngelo Russell leading up to this draft, is because he's left-handed. There were a few, James Harden comparisons, a guy that's not a great athlete, left-handed, is kind of crafty in the way that he scores, but people were really excited about DAngelo Russell because they felt like he was just so skilled and he had this pace and this poise about him that made a lot of people confident that he was going to be a really good NBA player. And obviously, initially, he struggled with injuries, and that didn't really come to fruition. But now with the Nets becoming an all-star, potentially a max-level contract free agent this summer, he's turned some things around very quickly. Weaknesses: still unproven as a point guard, as I said, still more of a combo guard at this point in his evaluation. So the question is, how long will it take to become effective and productive on the NBA level at the lead guard position? Turns out that's about 3.5 years. Not a big-time athlete. His length helps him to defend when he's a below-average run/jump athlete by NBA standards. So that was the other thing defensively, which is still kind of an issue for him in my opinion. He's got the size to be a good defender, just not as quick, not as fast as some other really good perimeter defenders in the league. So those are still things that he needs to improve on. So this is honestly pretty spot on as an evaluation at the time of the draft. Number 3 now, Jahlil Okafor. And like I said, this was kind of the guy that for, the first 20, 25 games of the college season was seen as the overwhelming number 1 prospect in this draft class because he was killing everybody in the post. He was a super good offensive player, and a lot of people were throwing out like crazy comparisons for him. Guys like Tim Duncan. This was just an incredible amount of hype for Jahlil Okafor leading up to the draft, or at least the first 20 to 25 games of the season. And then once we got closer to the draft, people started to realize that he wasn't as versatile as someone like Karl-Anthony-Towns, or maybe had as much upside as someone like DAngelo Russell. And we really started to move away from the post scorer as a focal point at all in the NBA, and more people started shooting a ton more threes, then he just kind of came in at the wrong time. NBA comparison, which again is pretty spot on, Brook Lopez and Al Jefferson. Now obviously Brook Lopez has turned himself into a completely different player now, but when he first came into the league, he was a 20-point per game scorer in the post. Al Jefferson as well also had some really good scoring seasons as primarily a post player, and that's what a lot of people thought Jahlil Okafor would end up being. And as a rookie, he was really good for Philadelphia, but things just kind of dropped off. It was a tough situation to be in, and he's starting to climb his way back into the NBA with the Pelicans at the moment. Strengths, one of the most advanced low post scorers the college game has seen in quite some time. Huge frame with strength that helps him establish post position on a regular basis. Gigantic soft hands. Look like there's a volleyball in his hand at times. This was a big deal for Jahlil Okafor. His scoring ability was something that we'd never really seen in the last 10 to 15 years in the college game in terms of how fluid he was, how just strong his fundamentals were, how easily almost he could score in the post. He was definitely an issue in his one college season at Duke. Weaknesses, while his conditioning at Duke was a great sign, he's the type of player who will need to work on this constantly and can still tone his body to maximize his athletic potential, lacks great lateral quickness, and is not an explosive leaper. That's something that has been a bit of an issue for him in this early part of his NBA career. Is defensively, he's not very good guarding and ball screens because he's just not exceptionally quick. Not that you'd expect someone with his kind of game to be outstandingly quick, but it doesn't change the fact that defensively he does still have some issues. Number 4 now is Kristaps Porzingis, who leading up to the draft was one of the more interesting prospects in this draft class. He's rated as a 96 overall, and his NBA comparison, as is typical when you have international players, they get compared to other international players, and his comparison was Andrea Bargnani / Pau Gasol. Strengths, it's not easy to find a legit 7-footer with great length and high-level athleticism. True. If you consider how well he runs the floor and his skill level, then you can understand why Porzingis is considered one of the most intriguing international players in recent years. It goes on to talk about his shooting and his rim protection abilities. We know all this about Kristaps Porzingis, and basically whatever high, lofty expectations people had for Porzingis, the people that were bullish on him, the people that thought he was going to be really good, they turned out to be right. With the Knicks, he had an outstanding rookie season and had some really productive seasons after that, obviously currently dealing with an injury. But all of these strengths have definitely come true. Great shooter, great scorer, great rim protector. Still needs to get stronger, but in terms of what he showed under his rookie contract, he showed everything he needed to be a max contract level player. Weaknesses, the main issue for Porzingis is his strength, which is still probably the case. And while he has more physicality than some people might think, he will need to get stronger to hold his own defensively in the post and actually build up his offensive post game that is currently not a strength. And that's one thing that a lot of people were surprised with about Porzingis in his rookie season, specifically with the Knicks. He came in, he was obviously very skinny. He still needs to work on getting stronger, but he definitely had a tenacity and he was not afraid to throw his weight around in the paint. And he was really physical with guys despite being pretty skinny, and that was something that endeared him to a lot of fans initially, as well as obviously his skill, his ability to have some crazy dunks and shoot threes and all that. But really, it's one of the things that endeared him to fans was just his tenacity in the paint, despite not being all that strong, which again is still something he needs to work on. Number 5 now, Mario Hezonja, who is a 94 overall, and the NBA comparison for him is Rex Chapman. And obviously Hezonja didn't stay with the Magic for very long, now is with the Knicks, and his NBA future is kind of up in the air. Strengths, standing 6'8", he has the ideal size for the wing position, has a solid structure and high-level athleticism, even by NBA standards. This was the big thing about Hezonja at the time, was he was supposed to be this not lights-out shooter, but a really good high-volume shooter with crazy athleticism, just kind of a different kind of international prospect than we're used to seeing as someone that can compete athletically with 95% of the league once he was immediately placed into the league and drafted. Weaknesses, he could still work on his body strength to better withstand contact in the NBA, lacks a solid mid-range game, which is the area where he struggles the most. But the weird thing about Hezonja was the thing that he ended up struggling with the most and continues to struggle with is shooting, which is something that almost everybody was really confident about coming into the league, that he was just so irrationally confident in his shot that he was going to be fine from there. But really, that's what's prevented him from being a usable NBA player. He can't shoot, he's not an outstanding defender, and really he's just a pretty good athlete at this point. And until his shot becomes more consistent, until he gets that confidence back, he's going to continue to bounce around the league and might end up, back in international play fairly soon, maybe even as soon as next season. Number 6 now, Willie CauleyStein, who's rated as a 92 overall. His NBA comparison is Chris Andersen and Samuel Dalembert. Strengths, CauleyStein is a player who's extremely gifted from a measurement standpoint, but also in terms of athleticism. extremely nimble and explosive and quick leaper, while also has tremendous defensive abilities, excelling at hedging on pick and rolls as well as protecting the rim. And that was the big thing about Willie CauleyStein, and is still the big thing about Willie CauleyStein, is the fact that he's a big that can switch on ball screens, that can hedge on ball screens, really athletic defensively, protects the rim, runs the floor, and just finishes inside. That's really the only thing you're going to ask from him. And him being so specialized and so good at those things was what made him, in this case, a top 6 pick. In terms of weaknesses, I'm not really going to read them just because it's pretty simple. He doesn't have really that much offensive skill outside of finishing inside, offensive rebounding, and running the floor, which is really okay. It's not really seen as much of a weakness nowadays because in the system that the Kings run, where you're just running up and down the floor, you're running a ton of ball screens, you don't really need a guy that's going to be posting up or have a lot of offensive skill unless he's going to be shooting threes, which obviously is not what CauleyStein is going to be doing. So he's really turned into pretty much exactly the kind of player that we thought that he would be coming out of the draft, and it's just going to depend on whether or not the Kings are going to want to pay to keep that skill set around this offseason. Number 7 now, Emmanuel Mudiay, and this is, I don't want to say the first big miss because obviously Jahlil Okafor and Mario Hezonja did not turn out very well for their initial teams. This one is an evaluation that is just different than a lot of other sites had, I feel like, because they have him rated as a 99 overall prospect, the best prospect in the class, and his NBA comparison is John Wall. And that's something that was not consistent, but something that was thrown around a good amount at the time of this draft. Was Emmanuel Mudiay couldn't shoot, but he was big, he was strong, super athletic, really good passer, and still a point guard even with all that size and strength. And that was really exciting to some people. Not really going to read the strengths and weaknesses too much because it's what I just said. Weaknesses, couldn't shoot. Strengths, really, really big, really, really athletic, really good passer, and is someone that can get to the rim basically whenever he wanted to. He went over to China to play for a year as opposed to going to school. Ended up getting hurt, didn't really play that many games over there, and then came over to the Nuggets in the draft and had one of the worst high-usage rookie seasons of all time, and has kind of found a footing with the Knicks, but's really struggled to find any kind of shooting consistency, and just the turnovers have been an issue. He just hasn't been as good as really people thought that he would be, and maybe that's because he played in China as opposed to going to school. Who knows? A couple more now. At number 8 is Frank Kaminsky, who is a 91 overall, and his NBA comparison was Nenad Krstić and Sean Marks. Strengths at 7 feet, there are not many players around with his offensive skill set, obviously. In weaknesses, the most obvious one is his subpar level of athleticism. So Kaminsky is a guy that coming out of the draft was seen as someone that can shoot, could score, and has a good amount of offensive skill set, but not an outstanding athlete, nor is he an outstanding defender. And obviously, famously, this is the pick that the Hornets could have traded to the Celtics, gotten a ton of picks so that the Celtics could take Justice Winslow, but instead they took Frank Kaminsky, and as recently as this trade deadline, were shopping him and potentially were interested in trading him. He just isn't great at any one thing. He doesn't really help you a ton in any one area, and just hasn't been as good of an offensive player as some people thought he would at the NBA level. Oh, I skipped one. I went straight to 9, which was Kaminsky. We're going to go back. This is 8, and this is Stanley Johnson, who's a 97 overall on this site, and they compared him to 2 of the best defensive wings in NBA history, and Kawhi Leonard and Ron Artest. And strengths are, he's a versatile two-way wing player with considerable upside, turns 19 in May, solid feel for the game, ultimate competitor, and does the little things it takes to win. Obviously, he's an outstanding athlete, someone that was really, really strong, was going to be a super good defender, and even in his one season at Arizona, showed to have an okay jump shot, at least something that you could work with. But weaknesses, a little bit inconsistent on both ends of the floor, and that's been something that's been a theme throughout his career. Early on, like the first probably year and 2 months of his career, Stanley Johnson looked like a player that was going to be a building block for the Pistons. He was super competitive, really good defensive player, not outstanding shooting-wise, but that was always going to take some time to really develop. And then it just fell off. He just lost his confidence. He's been very inconsistent and just doesn't seem like he belongs, honestly, on an NBA floor, whether it be with the Pistons or now, obviously, with the Pelicans. And the last one I'm going to look at in the video today is Justice Winslow with the 10th pick. He was a 97 rated prospect on this site. And the NBA comparison is James Harden and Wilson Chandler. And this goes back a little bit to what I talked about with DAngelo Russell, where if you're a kind of athletic, left-handed, crafty scorer type player, then people are going to compare you to James Harden. Strengths, Big-time athlete with elite-level speed and athleticism, obviously different than James Harden, shows the ability to score in a variety of ways with spot-up shooting as well as scoring off the dribble. Weaknesses: throughout his high school and AAU career, he flashed tremendous talent but struggled to sustain a high level of consistency. And that's been the biggest issue for Justice Winslow. He'd go on a couple week stretches where he looks like a future All-Star and a couple week stretches where he looks like the 11th man on the Heat roster. And it's just something that's really frustrating but also really intriguing about his game, as someone that can be a playmaker at his size. Maybe not a full-time point guard, but someone that can be a secondary ball handler, a secondary playmaker on the floor, and at times run the offense himself. Just the bigger issue was in his first couple of years with the Heat, they wanted him to play off the ball, off of their more talented playmakers, and allow him to spot up and shoot and attack closeouts and guard really good players on the defensive end, and his shot just never really developed, and is something that he's still working on, and something that I'm really interested to see how Justice Winslow continues to progress. He's already re-signed with the Heat. He's under team control for the next couple of years and could end up being a really big bargain for them, along with Josh Richardson as someone that could really be building blocks for the Heat as they start to get out from under some salary and maybe be big players in free agency moving forward. But there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, looking back at some 2015 NBA draft prospect evaluations, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.